The first thing we're going to do is, and because this is lunchtime, Sean Sheets, our child nutrition dude, sorry, that's me, it has to run off and do those things. So I wanted to start with him and get rolling. I want to give you the context for why I'm asking Sean to speak today. The first is that I think it was last time, our meeting, we had a question about elementary cafeteria. And I don't know how it came up. It was when we were doing our community-based accountability system, and it was basically like, hey, why does my kid not like to eat at the elementary cafeteria? What are you guys doing in there? And so I said at the time, I said, that's interesting because the superintendent has a students' leadership council that she meets with them 3 or 4 times a year. And in a previous meeting, the elementary kids said the same thing. And so they were training the kids on leadership and when you identify problems, what do you do? And so as part of that, the superintendent brought in Sean Sheets to come meet with the kids. We walked them down to the high school cafeteria and explained to them just kind of the various rules and things that govern the school lunch program at the elementary and how that's a little different at the high school. And we asked questions and we gave kids samples. And so I wanted to kind of mimic that presentation as much as we could. Of course, we don't have kids here and we don't have samples other than the great lunch. But I think it was very informative both for the students at all levels. The elementary, the middle school, and the high school students found it very informative. And so I think you'll find it informative as well. Just kind of a big picture primer on child nutrition. And so, Sean, you take it away, and I'll fill in gaps however you want. So this is Sean Sheets.
Thank you, Dr. Alfaro. So I want to welcome everybody, and I appreciate the time that y'all are allowing me to kind of, like Frank said, put in a big picture of everything that goes on in the school cafeterias, because I believe there's a disconnection between what the government says and what gets down to community level. But however, though, I'll start with, as my 9-year-old's embarrassed when my wife and I say it, today being Wednesday, we are on the downhill stretch. And he always goes, gosh, why did I say that? So we are on the downhill stretch. But so to kind of start what we call the National School Lunch Program and the School Breakfast Program, this is a federally assisted meal program operating in public and non-private schools and residential child care institutions. It provides nutritionally balanced, low-cost, free breakfast and or lunches to children each and every day that are eligible for that. So this program was established under the Richard B. Nelson National School Lunch Act, signed by President Harry Truman in 1946. So this isn't a new thing. It's been around for a while, but every year it gets updated and stuff. So who administers this program? The USDA works hand in hand with the Food and Nutrition Service of the United States to create rules and guidelines, and then they pass it down to the states, which they can either make a little bit more strict, or they can follow those as they are set forth by USDA. Participating school districts and independent schools receive cash and subsidies and USDA foods for each reimbursable meal they serve. And a reimbursable lunch meal, for instance, we have to offer 5 of the 5 food groups. To be considered a reimbursable meal, they will be required to take 3 of the 5 food groups, with a vegetable or a fruit being mandatory for that meal. So if the student does just want a slice of pizza, we encourage them to go to the salad bar, which is all you can serve. We don't have plastic cups that say this is what you have to have. One of our pros is that we have that salad bar, so they can get 4 apples if they like apples. They can get 2 scoops of peaches if they want 2 scoops of peaches. So that's where the self-serve salad bar comes in, as well as giving them the choice. Instead of saying, here, you have to take this, you have to take that, they get that choice. So with receiving that reimbursable meal, depending on the eligible status, the school district receives a reimbursement back from the government for that meal. And the purpose of that is for the child nutrition program to become self-sufficient. Because as we all know, funding comes from somewhere. And we don't want to have to be spending money to keep a program growing where there's no return, no ROI on it. So the next part of it is nutrition requirements for our lunches and breakfast. So as kind of a rules that we have to follow when it comes to actual meal nutrition standards and components. For example, in our lunch setting, we have to have at least 5 cups a week of milk offered. So in our schools at Woodridge and Cambridge, we have chocolate milk, low fat. So if some of your students are like, I don't like the chocolate milk at school, well, that's because we're required to serve low fat chocolate milk. If you buy the True Moo or the Hygeia at the grocery store, I mean, that's loaded, and that's why it tastes a lot better. And a lot of nutrition standards come off of that fact. Like, I know, for example, on pizza days, which is like our highest participation day, some students will say, well, this is not like Domino's, or it's not like Pizza Hut. Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that one of the guidelines is that we have to serve whole grain. Another one is part of the low-fat milk. We have to have low-fat cheese. So that like gloss and that goodness that you get from like Papa John's or Domino's, that is something that comes from the cheese. And per nutrition standards, that is too much to give a nutritionally balanced meal to our students. One of the 3 big categories that we have to, when menuing, is our saturated fat, our sodium targets, and our trans fat. When we procure items, the label has to indicate 0 trans fat. When we menu this year, this year, we're ending our target 1 sodium content or requirements that we cannot go over, which is basically salt. I mean, and we're Texas too. I grew up in South Texas, in Brownsville, Texas. We use salt in everything. But for example, starting July 1st, for 6th to 8th graders, the target level for sodium is less than 470 percent of the items menued, whereas this year that we're in right now is 535. So USDA is year over year looking at reducing the sodium in our meals. So our goal is to try to counterbalance that with extra spices that do not have any nutritional value. So for example, those will be extra pepper. When we make our pizza sauce, we start out with a tomato paste. And then we mix in our water, we mix in all the sauces, we cook it up, cool it down, and that's ready for service the next day. We add all the spices. Like I said, what our goal is to do is to make the most appealing and tasteful items without using very much salt. Which our pizza sauce and spaghetti sauce is an example of we make from scratch. So this is probably, the nutrition standards is the biggest part of what we call the ARM, which is our rules and regulations, guidebook, Bible that you would say. And that is 1,500 plus pages of rules and regulations to run our school cafeterias. And so we try every day to make sure that we're meeting regulations because we get audited every 3 years. We're trying to make sure that all of our kids are happy. We're trying to make sure that we're being cost conscious, all in the same thing, but also following those rules and regulations. So with so many rules and regulations, we always question, how do we keep improving on a thriving and a well-balanced program such as here in Alamo Heights, especially coming out of our pandemic time? Well, the first thing is that in working with Dr. Alfaro and Dr. Bashira is to be a part of every student advisory council meeting. We started one with a group a couple weeks back, and now we're moving into the next couple weeks, individual meetings with campuses. Some of the feedback from that was different fruits on the salad bar. We had just had a farmer's market, which I introduced raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries to the students at Cambridge Elementary and Woodridge Elementary. They absolutely loved it. We have that being served the last week in April, in the last week of April. Some stuff that we know a week in advance that we are eligible to receive from the Department of Defense, which sends us our produce, is grapefruits. We had grapefruits all the way up to the junior high the last couple weeks. We've had whole pears added to the menu. So in part of the students asking for more fruits, it's good that to be a part of these meetings is so that we can be active and the students having say in not only what's going on in their school, but extending that into the cafeteria as well. And so one of the things that I thank them for, and I'm thanking the parents and adults and the students that we have here, is that the pandemic really put a hamper on experiencing the joy of the kids coming through. We've had separate serving areas. And I thank them, I want to thank y'all for the patience in working with the school district, knowing that we have 5 different serving areas, and at the same time, we're having to work with COVID protocols. We're having to work with staff not returning because of unsureness and stuff. And moving back into the cafeterias that have all the choices. That was the biggest heartbreaker for me, was the students not having the choices. Because some students don't like hamburgers. Some students don't like orange chicken, which most all of them do. Some students don't like the pizza. So it's very hard to say all of these areas serve. They're not having a choice right now because of the situation of the pandemic we're in. Once we started opening the lines to full participation of seeing what we have to offer and salad bars, the amount of students that were eating was increased over before the pandemic. At the same time, we saw students that were bringing in their lunches also going through the line. So I believe that having that option, and Jimmy and I have talked about this a lot, is having that option greatly impacts the way our students are eating in these cafeterias. And so moving forward, actually, some challenges that we did see in the past couple of years, staffing issues that I mentioned, trying to navigate different serving areas, preparing in bulk for 450 kids eating, and having a small window to get to 5 different places. Challenging. And the biggest one was our supply chain issues. It was happening last summer, and it's getting worse and worse now because there's such a demand in school nutrition for whole grain. We've had farmers that have had to wipe out entire crops and start from over. So the whole grain is difficult. Beef patties. Every week we get an updated list on stuff that our distributor is not receiving from their purveyor. So it's just an ongoing struggle. But I will say in our area, in talking with other school districts and other school districts that we partner with SFE, Alamo Heights has seen the least amount of disruption. And I allude that to Chef Warren, who prepared y'all's lunches today, and myself for constantly being on top of that and making sure that we have substitutions that will work for us, as opposed to removing everything off the menu. Some school districts have gone down to 1 serving line because they don't have the staff. We look at the whole picture and where can we work to make sure students can go through in a reasonable amount of time. I helped out in Del Rio, and their challenge is not only the supply chain but also staffing. 2 of their elementary schools, they have to have 1 line for 600 kids. And so I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And I know as a principal, that's almost not feasible because you have to get in your instructions for the day. So in the area And with some partners in our company, we are seeing the least disruption in that. So I'm very thankful for that. Moving forward, I touched on the advisory council meeting to solicit positive feedback, opportunities. I mean, we always have kids that are like, I want prime rib or I want ribeye. And I'm like, I mean, we'll try to get that out for, 600 kids, but we'll see what we can do. But also is to start on a regular, having more of these farmers markets where different vegetables are introduced to the students, different fruits, and then being able to put them on the line. Like I said, we work with the Department of Defense, or the government, the state does, to supply a certain amount of money every year for produce. So when that comes in and it's in season, we try to order it up where we can so that we can push it out to the students. Also, with moving forward and hosting roving chefs, it's an opportunity for students to, for a small group of students to be able to make their own little pizzas, to make something to take home, but also have some education behind it as well. And then lastly, I am working on creating a monthly nutrition newsletter that when we have a new communications person, that they can put it on our child nutrition page, that they can put it on Facebook, but also have copies in the schools. It's very light. It's just some basic information, some cool stuff you can try at home. But it's just to kind of promote the cafeteria, promote healthy eating and stuff like that. And that's just what I wanted to kind of go over with y'all.
That's a good big picture. Sean, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So I'll give you a chance to ask any questions, but I do want to give you summarize kind of the big points. So as you're walking out and telling folks that the number one thing that I want y'all to walk away with is that serving lunch at the elementaries and the middle school, we have to follow these food guidelines. And in terms of taste and experience, the number one things, at least, 'cause I'm a eater, and so I'll say it's sodium and fat. And so that really limits kind of the way things look and taste. And the classic example was with the kid asked about the pizza. I was out; it was hilarious. He's like, "Hey, it's just not like glistening, and it gets so cold so fast." And he's like, that glisten is fat, and we can't serve that kind of cheese. And so it's just an eye-opening moment, as well as the sodium. And so that's just kind of one thing. However, the second point I want you to walk away with is that even within those limitations, Sean is super open to feedback from kids and parents. So give them feedback as you can, and they work as hard as they can to have healthy and tasty options going along. The third thing I want to point out that's been unique to us for years, maybe it's not unique anymore because people have caught up, is that having an all-you-can-eat salad bar at every campus from elementary going up, that was a huge deal for health. Now, kids got to choose it, but it's there for them to take. And then the last point is something we've talked about before. This group actually gave the recommendation that when we opened the new high school over here, because of the opportunity where the kids were older and the kids were able to make choice, you want to train kids to make choices, right? And so, and they could have a little bit more power to buy their own lunch. We made the decision as a district, based on a recommendation from this team, is to go off that national lunch program at the high school so that we can have more flexibility away from all of these things. And so we can offer more tasty things like this, but they're older, it's a little bit more expensive. But all of the money that we raise there, we're still able to provide free and reduced lunch for kids who qualify. We're just not getting that from the federal government. That's all coming in-house. And so they're kind of the four big points to take away. Sean does a great job within the limitations, but I think the general public just doesn't understand the limitations we have at the elementary and the middle school. Still, we're open to feedback, and we'll try to make it better as we can. Any other questions for Sean?
I will say, though, with opening the lines up, the feedback that I've received, and Frank touched on it with the student that talked about the pizza, is we're able to batch cook, which we have the different options, and we're able to cook continuously because we have that time where we're not transporting food, boxing it up, because we were being as safe as possible. So some may say, well, couldn't you do that with boxing it up? But boxing it up to put your vegetable, your fruit, and an entree in there, it takes a considerable amount of time. But with with the lines being open and the choices, we're able to batch cook, which is a continuous cook. So now, when pizza day does come around, we prep 70 pizzas, but we'll cook 15 at a time, continuous, so that when the students are coming in, we have those ready to go, as opposed to having to cook them all before, because the time that we were allotted to cook continuously, that time was being used to have to box everything up. So with opening up, things have, things are a lot cooler.
For all of us.
Yeah.
Anything else for Sean? Any questions? You want to, Bobby?
Thank you for Thanksgiving. I always feel that Thanksgiving dinners are great
Thank you.
on campus. So we have an expiring program for students. It's like free for everyone. What is our district's percentage of kids who do qualify for free or reduced?
So to touch on the free lunch, the pandemic relief, that is being stopped by the government at the end of the school year. So I had a conversation with Mike Hagar about it yesterday, because I want to start putting out communication as early as possible, because that will be a change. So
Yeah, let's catch everybody up, just in case you don't know. Because of the pandemic, for this whole year, anybody from elementary through middle school could eat the reimbursable meal for free. And so everybody gets free lunch. But that's this year only because of the government's pandemic support.
correct. So that will be stopping at the end of the school year. There are school nutrition representatives that have been up to Washington in the past several months to try to get that reversed, because just like in the supply chain, there are still a lot of families that are in need of it still to this day. Okay. So the communication that we're working on is to try and get the government's official statements, and then follow that up with how the district is proceeding in following that as well. To your second question, the free and reduced percentage for Alamo Heights is, when I looked at it yesterday, was 20.93%. So out of the enrollments, this is including high school, there's almost 900 kids that are free and reduced. And we have close to a 4,800 enrollment. So that's where we stand on our free and reduced percentage. But like Frank said, with opening up stuff at the high school is able to become self-sufficient, because the last thing anybody wants to do is have to pull money out of their general fund to subsidize a program. And the same goes for the child nutrition.
Yeah, high school lunches are a little bit more expensive because of that, but that
Right.
helps the fund.
But we also have signage at the high school for our combo meals. So if a student is free and reduced, they get a fountain drink or a water. They get an entree and a side item and any food set they want. If they just want a single a la carte item, well, then it's respectfully charged and stuff. But that's $5. And I mean, for some of the stuff, if y'all haven't gone through our high school cafeteria, you really can't get that at another, like a lunch spot. If you add in tax and tip and all that. And plus, we got a pretty cool coffee shop as well. And we keep up with like the Starbucks and the local shops to where we're just under what they're charging for us to be more appealing and whatnot.
That's very good coffee. I will attest to that.
Yeah. And our soda fountains is more on the local mindset. We use Main Root. It's a company out of Austin. So it's not like Coca-Cola Classic and Dr. Pepper and stuff. We have Doppelganger as the Dr. Pepper equal and stuff. So it's really cool that we have some stuff that offsets, I guess, the mainstream, and to keep up with, staying into like the, not local niche, but like the hip niche.
Yeah, pretty good. Any other questions for Sean? All right, let's give a round of applause, Sean. I know you got a lot to do, so you take care
Thank
of
you.
whatever business you need, and I'll move on to the next thing.
I'll see you.
Jimmy?
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to switch over, and I'll remind everybody that this is the next installment in our ongoing community-based accountability conversations. As a quick review, we have 7 pillars overall. We chew off 1 or 2 each meeting. Chew off. We process through 1 or 2 each meeting. And so the whole point here is that as a school, we want to be held accountable, But we don't want to be held accountable to the legislators per se. We want to be held accountable to our faculty, our community, and our parents for the hopes and dreams and aspirations of what we have for our students. And so that's what defines our 7 pillars. Jimmy, take it away.
All right, thank you. So, I do have handouts for y'all, but like a good teacher, I'm going to talk first and then give you the handout. So, today we are continuing to talk about, hang on. Yay. So we're talking about community-based accountability. Frank did a good job of teeing it up. We're ramping up to state accountability. Kids are getting ready to take the STAR test, and we want to ensure all of our kids are well prepared to do their best for whatever assessments are in front of them. But we do feel like the accountability system is overly narrow. It relies on one test given on one day and only for students that take that test. So that is none of our students from pre-K to second grade or our high school students who may have already passed POC. So we do respond to that by knowing our community expects more than that. And that's where our community-based accountability system comes in. It does look at 7 different pillars. It's all grade levels. It's multiple measures of data because there are multiple assessments, but all they tell you is how your child did on one thing on one day. So we like putting multiple things together, and then you all are instrumental in the community feedback part. So we put it in front of you, and you give us feedback rather than the state about how are we doing as your local school district. So, there we go. I'm going to review what you all have looked at before in pillars 1 to 4. This is our last meeting of the year, which is hard to imagine. And people have been at some meetings and not at others, so I'll just review it. Then I'm going to quickly go over pillars 5 and 6, which are community engagement and high quality faculty and staff. And then we're going to divide into groups. So, like Carrie, you may want to hop over there in a moment. And each group, we're going to kind of jigsaw. So you'll look at one thing, you'll look at another, and then we'll share out at the end. And then whatever signal or feedback you give is what I then take and present to the trustees. You'll recall that the signals that you give back to us are one of these 4 things. On track, meaning our current systems are working, keep going. Adjustments being made means there's already an improvement plan in place, keep working the plan. We're not where we want to be, but let's work the plan. Support required means in order to get where we want to be, additional effort, resources, or expertise is needed to move the needle, or we're in a crisis mode here, and we need a significant change, and we need significant additional resources to get where we want to be. So in September, we looked at Pillar 1, student learning and progress. We looked at STAR scores, which were not where we wanted them to be. But we did say adjustments were being made because there was a plan in place. We looked at our PSAT scores. They were quite good. You all said we're on track there. Student readiness is also about student learning, but it's asking the question, are kids ready for their next stage of learning? We looked at SAT scores, which were our highest we have seen. You said we are on track. AP scores, likewise on track. But you did give us feedback that there were some specific things. Remember, we looked at the language scores that we want to continue to monitor some specific groups and grades. In February, we looked at student well-being and safety. We looked at belonging, not where we want to be, but adjustments being made, but rigorous expectations. We saw some positive change with relationships and school safety, all on track. Engaged, well-rounded students, we looked at participation in activities. 88% of all of our students, junior school, high school, are involved in something. We know how important that is. We looked at participation in special services, gifted and talented special education. We talked about some adjustments that were being made, such as universal COGAT Iowa testing for every second grader, in addition to the kinder second, and also fifth. I'm going to pause on this one. Those of you that were here last time, remember we talked about how many students are participating in high school advanced academics, which is, we now call it advanced. It used to be pre-AP, AP, or dual credit. And I put this data in front of you. This is our student groups At the high school, so economically disadvantaged at the high school, 16.9% of students at the high school identified as economically disadvantaged. When we look at all of our students currently this year in advanced AP dual credit, 4% of those students are identified as economically disadvantaged. Do you all remember this data? And at the time, as a group, we were like, wow. I specifically remember Dylan being like, crisis. This is a crisis. This is not where we want to be. We need to make sure we have everyone who wants to be in there and that we have the support to ensure that they feel they can do it and are supported while they do it. Absolutely valid point. And then we had Stacy, I don't mean to put you under the bus, but Stacy also was like, but we opened it up in 2008. Anyone who wants to take an AP class can do it. Has this changed since we did that? Such an intriguing question, and I'm coming back to you with more information. So, I don't have this exact data of who was in classes back in 2006, but what I did find is every year, State of Texas compiles the TAPER, Texas Academic Performance Report. It's compiled, we get this data every year, and there's something that's been tracked going all the way back to 2000 called AP Course Completer. And this looks at annual graduates. How many of the seniors getting ready to walk the stage at some point in their high school career took an AP course, earned credit for the AP course, and sat for the exam? And that's called an AP completer, and it's a percentage of annual graduates. So I went back, way back before the strategic plan. So 2006. In the state, 22% of annual graduates had taken an AP course at some time. In Alamo Heights, we were at 38% of our graduates. And of our graduates who were identified as economically disadvantaged, 9% of them. So that gap was there in 2006. We opened it up, and you can see the slow progress. We went from 9% of students identified as economically disadvantaged in advanced academics to 15 to 18. But fast forward to 2018-19, now 47% of our graduates who are identified as economically disadvantaged have completed an AP course. And in 2019-20, 53% of them have completed an AP course. Are we where we want to be? No. Can we do better? Absolutely. But to me, this is positive. Like, I see this, and whereas before we were sitting in crisis, when we look out and see a bigger picture, it does fill in some of those gaps. So this is why, you guys, I have completely drunk the Kool-Aid about community-based accountability. Because when we just focus on one narrow piece of data, it's an incomplete view. But because of your feedback and a little bit of research, now we can see through the window clearly. So I just wanted to come back because before, the signal out was crisis. And so at the end, when we're signaling, I'll give you the opportunity if you want to say, is this still crisis? Are we support required? Or on track? Whatever you think it is at that point. So that's finishing up what we did before. So here's the work for today. We're going to look at Pillar 5, community engagement. And Group 1 is going to be looking at a unique question for this year that centers on pandemic response. Did we engage the community to support students in response to disrupted learning from the pandemic? This is the group that has the most data to look at. Group 2, still in community engagement, but this is the question we have every year. Are our students supported by an engaged community? Group 3 is going to look at professional learning, and this is, are our students supported by a high-performing faculty and staff? We'll look at credentials and experience of teachers and some feedback, survey questions, and then are we providing adequate professional development? Likewise, that's some survey questions. So I'm going to go over the data kind of quickly, knowing that what I want is you to have time at your group to talk it through, and Frank and I or anyone here can certainly chime in if there's individual questions. Does that work? So Pillar 5 is ensure that the local community are a meaningful, integral part of public schools and supportive of their schools. So this is that first question I said that's unique for this year. To what degree did Alamo Heights effectively engage the community to support students and to support disrupted learning caused by the pandemic? And here's the why. Like, our families walked in August to these headlines. That's pretty alarming. Did it slow my child's development? We're in disruption for a third year. Students lose ground. So when we talk about community engagement this year, there was a unique need there. You hear the big headlines, but as a parent, what you want to know is, what does this mean for my child? What does this mean for mine? All these headlines are alarming. What does this mean for me? Our decision there was to prioritize individual parent-student conferences to talk about your child. So on these next few slides, we're just listing out, because you know the conferences you had for your child, but you may not know what was going on district-wide. So this is just listing out all the purposeful opportunities we built in so that parents could talk to a teacher. A hot topic was early literacy. Pre-K interrupted, kindergarten interrupted, and kids are sitting in first grade. Parents are like, is my child on track? How are they doing learning to read? Who do you want to talk to? You want to talk to one of our first grade teachers who have an average of 14 years of experience teaching 6-year-old children to read. You want to talk to them and get consult, what can I do at home? And so we were setting up those opportunities. So they're just listed here for each level, and then also some information about special populations, because there were some opportunities just for our emergent bilingual Spanish-speaking families, our students served by special education. So that's one piece of data. That's input, things we did. Now it turns to, how well did we do those things? So you've got a couple questions from February, because those things were in place from August through February, asking parents, how concerned are you about the impact of pandemic? How clearly did we communicate? You can look at that. And then this was asking parents, and I broke this down by level, how concerned are you about academic growth? And you can see where parents are now. We've looked at this kind of data before, but if you weren't in that meeting, this is when you've done the surveys and there are those open-ended responses. And parents and students and teachers take the time to give very thorough feedback there. It's read by at least 4 people. And we read everything and we code it, which is, the code is just, if I were putting it in a file folder, what would that file, what's the topic? So community support, the theme is, there's outstanding community support. Here's an example of what that comment was. And here's how many times there was a comment like that in the data. So this, I think, is helpful to get our community voice in the room when we're ascertaining how did we do. So I pulled out just the themes that seemed to be about responding to COVID. I left out the comments about parking, the comments about cafeteria, and just kept in these. So you can see this. What the colors mean is we take all of the comments and put it into 4 quartiles. The things that were said the most are dark green. The second quartile is a little bit lighter green, lighter green, lighter green. Blue is, it wasn't really said before. So you can look and go, this community support, that's been a top theme for the past 4 years. But if you come down to this appreciation, it's always been said, but this year that theme was so strong about appreciation. And this wasn't just someone tacking thank you at the end. This was a genuine expression of appreciation, and it was said 108 times in the data. So you can just look through all of this when you're in your small groups, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. It does have things that are positive, like those first 4, but then it also has some things that are feedback actionable that we need to move into. The top one being more printed. Parents are like, I want to help my child, but if I could see something in front of me, I would know how to help them. So that was an emerging theme. We need to relax protocols. We need stronger protocols. Like, we've got all of it in there. So you can take a look at that. So that's group one. That's the biggest group, the most to look at. The second is a question we always look at. Are students supported by an engaged community? And this is, engaged community here is, are we responsive to the needs of students, our families saying, here's what my child needs. Are we hitting the mark? So we ask, do Alamo Heights systems and structures match the unique needs of your child? And it goes through all of these domains. Take a look at that. This is group two. And then this one is, I say this every time I get the opportunity to speak, it's my favorite question on the whole survey. Because when you see headlines and so many people feel like their school system let them down this year, when we go to our families and we said, how likely are you to recommend Alamo Heights to a family or colleague, 95% positive response. We're right back where we were before the pandemic. I love this one because I feel like we did get comments that said that were frustration or please do this or anger, but we also get this. And I know if any time I'm in a relationship or anything, I love my job, I have the best job in the best district. I can tell you 5 things right now I'd change. But I know I have the best job and I know it's the best district. So you can hold both. The last question is pillar 6. To what degree are our students supported by a high-performing faculty and staff? We've got degrees, experience, and turnover rate here. Question to staff overall, how satisfied are you working at Alamo Heights? You can see that breakdown. And then this turns to, once we've hired our teacher, are we supporting them with professional development?
Have you noticed on that last slide with satisfaction, like, is there a change pre-pandemic and post-pandemic?
It went up, and I'll look that up for you.
Good.
Yeah. This one, whereas that went up, our professional development went down because we just haven't offered it to the degree that we were able to before. But you can see how our staff, what they feel is helpful in terms of professional development. And also this is asking areas that our staff feel confident in, subject knowledge, areas that they do not feel as confident in. How do I meet the needs of a child who's 2 years behind? Which gives us direction and planning. So that's the overview. What I'm going to ask you to do is for each of the 4 key questions, just to, one, share any ahas you guys had or any lingering questions. So I hear them, Frank hears them, and for the good of the group, and tell us your signal. Does that make sense? So key points and a signal. And I'm going to write it down. So you guys, can I start with you? They have a big one. To what degree did Alamo Heights engage their community in supporting students with disrupted learning? So tell us your key points and tell us where you landed.
Okay, so we decided that we are kind of in between adjustments being made and support required. Ours was the first one about how we felt AHIC engaged the community to support students in response to disruptive learning during the pandemic. And so we talked about different aspects of learning. We talked about just regular classroom like math, science, subject learning, and then we also talked about social emotional learning and how it kind of differed depending on the grade level too, especially with the younger grades, there might be a little more support required just because it was such a critical year of retaining skills. And so that's why we decided we're kind of in between adjustments being made because there is stuff that's in place that is working currently, and then there's some areas, especially for the younger ones, of where we might want to do a little more intervention. Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, no, well done. That makes sense. Thank you guys. So key question number 2 was just, to what degree are students supported by an engaged community? So the more holistic as opposed to targeted engagement. Tell us your key thoughts and where you guys landed.
We felt on track and we were overall pretty impressed with how they responsive.
Yeah, we felt like we had an easy.
I guess the one thing we noticed, I mean, pretty obvious, we talked about, comfort and asking for help, how do we improve that?
All right.
The only thing was it's the comfort in asking. Encourage your kids to go talk to their teacher and ask.
So the question was asked by parents, how comfortable is your child asking for help? And that was the lowest of the different domains. And so their conversation was just, it's a shared partnership, empowering the student to do that and encouraging, and the teacher creating an environment that will, some students are really outgoing, happy to raise their hand and say they need help, and other students may be a little more reticent, and have we set up systems to meet both. So thank you all very much.
Thank you for helping.
The third one was, and I think this is you all, and this is just to what degree are Alamo Heights learners supported by a high quality faculty and staff. So tell us your key thoughts and where you landed.
We talked at first about how we were really encouraged by both the teachers with 1 to 5 years of experience and then balancing that with the teachers with 11 to 20 years of experience, and how that is such a nice environment for teachers to teach in, just that new teachers coming in with great new ideas and older teachers having the experience and the history in the school, and how that makes for such a great environment for all the teachers in school. We talked a little bit about that 7% of beginning teachers and just the worry over recruitment in a time where the teacher pipeline is tightening and it's going to be harder to find teachers, and how that also relates to the bottom graph there of satisfaction at their jobs being a really important measure to recruiting new teachers, and also our wishes that there was even more enticement we can throw at those people. We talked also about looking at that recruitment issue, how there's 73% of the teachers in Alamo Heights have bachelor's degrees and 25% with masters, how the masters may be more relevant for higher, like the high school and maybe the junior school where the material is more subject specific, and not as much in elementaries where it's more general education, but also how in a recruitment tightening situation where we may have more and more with like, come with your bachelor's, we're happy to include any teachers that are going to be here for our kids. We talked a little bit about the piece of the pie that isn't in the extremely satisfied or quite satisfied bracket, and just you brought up a good point about just how for some reason, and Heather mentioned, just some teachers are feeling more exhausted, more stressed this year, even though some of the pandemic stress is maybe lightening in our community, and just there are going to be teachers who aren't happy because of that, but I don't know, we didn't really get to what we could do about that, but just knowing that it's hard for some people and teachers to teach at all right now.
The other point that I made was that in general, when you get feedback from teachers about things that can be improved, that tends to be more very campus specific. And so as a district, there might be some things we can do, but we really kind of make sure the principal hears that stuff if there's something on a given campus.
That's good. So that I looked it up, the overall of satisfied, quite satisfied, extremely, I think were the three gradations. It was 84% satisfied or above. The last time we did this survey, we didn't do it the year of the pandemic, and now it's at 91. So that is a positive increase. So where did you guys land in terms of the
We
signal?
felt like we were on track.
Thank you for that. All right, last group, you had the professional development, which is the next step away from credential certification. Once teachers are with us, are we supporting them?
Sure.
Thanks, Todd.
I would say, Brian pointed out, and I would agree that our teachers are definitely happy working with one another, and the usefulness of whether it's PLCs or what the other campuses are working through, that has been huge. I think with our district being a district of innovation, having instructional coaches who are super inspiring and motivating us every day has helped out a lot. I think so. I'd say in that regard we're on track, but I think the eye-opening part of it where we might need some support is the value of PD and the value of formal evaluations. because the overall green was pretty low, and it just happened that last year at about this time I interviewed five teachers about professional development, and they all prefaced that by saying you can't make all teachers happy all the time, but here's what we like, here's what we don't like. And if there's going to be anything big, we need more time to implement it, and maybe not just thrown on us, the third day of welcome back week. Hey, get it out by Monday. That type of stuff. But I think our district, going back 7 or 8 years, has done a really good job of sending out surveys of what we would like in our Choose Your Own Professional Development days. But I think we can continue to grow in that area. So I think we gave that support required. The other one, I think we're on track as far as teacher efficacy. Really don't have much follow-up on that one. And part of that might be due to the fact that we have about 60% of our teachers have taught at least 11 years. So that always helps, retention.
Thank you, guys. Any follow-up comments about any of the data for today? So then here's my last question, and this is a genuine. This is our last meeting. This is our third time to look at data. And it's the first year, if you had been on DEAC, and I think some of you have, we did all of this at the end of the year. You thought this was a lot. We did pillars 1, 2, 3, 4. We did all of it. So I would just like some feedback on the process of, these are my words, chunk and chew, taking it a little bit at a time. Just your thought of how it sits with you. What's the process in mind? An inch is, oh, I like that.
I liked that it was broken up, but I also liked how you started today with I got some information on this and let me add color to that. I thought that was helpful.
I appreciate the homework you gave yourself to kind of follow up on some of the things that we discussed. I think that's helpful.
Yeah, I think the more you can show people, especially teachers, who can get a little high strung, that progress is being made, but we still have progress to make, that's huge. So that slide was really good.
Can I pose some questions related? Now that we have walked through all of the different categories of the CBAS and Jenny kind of overviewed what it was, is there any criteria or standard that anyone in here feels like is not covered by those categories? And that comes from, having been with Timmy from the beginning on the CBAS committee before then it turned into this and breaking it up. Is there any aspect of our district that you feel like is not being evaluated in one of these buckets? Or put differently, is there any problem in the district that you think we would identify that problem if we put it into our CBAS and if we looked at it every year?
As you're thinking about that, I'll say it in a different way. One of the things that the intent is that this is a comprehensive view, and that we're checking things. And in general, we're not surprised by stuff that's important to us. Because sometimes you're like, oh, something happened, we didn't know that was happening. So we feel like we want to have a comprehensive view, so we're not surprised by things that are important to us. So that's a different way of saying that. So we feel like everything that's important to us is represented, because if we're overlooking something, we don't want to do that. Something important.
That face, I know you're thinking something. That's okay. So
this
I'll
is how
add.
we judge ourselves. And so if we're missing a category in there,
Well, I'm going to put a little asterisk on this because one thing that we are working on is an effective way to aggregate discipline data. Because that is something that we do want to look at, but finding a way to take things that are very student-centered and how do we find a way to look at that and judge as a community how we're doing. So we're working through a way to do that. We're not there yet, but we've been actively working on that. The other is the financial, and those two of them are external, they're audit reports. So, and then the other one is, I think there was a request for a follow-up mini team, I think, for the federal programs. Didn't Tori?
But yeah, we have to do a subcommittee for that.
For federal programs. So,
I'm glad you brought up the discipline one, because that's one, right? So we've talked about a lot of things, but if, as a student or as a teacher, you know, we talked about a lot of stuff that I experienced in my school today, except for student misbehavior. Like, it's not in there anyway. And so that's why she's like, we're figuring out how to do that. We haven't quite figured that out. We did a first swipe on what data might be useful. We're not quite there.
Sorry.
Yeah. Student discipline?
Yeah, I mean, as far as overall.
Well, that's the question. So like if I said,
School, grade, not grade level, but well, like elementary or student level.
what's the question? Like I'd ask, what do you think it should be? Because I know that just in talking to parents here or there, or listening to Scuttlebutt at the Little League field, or discipline comes up. Did you hear about so and so? This kid did so and so. Well, can be a big part of our experience sometimes, but it's not in there. So my question would be like, so as a parent, you do talk about discipline. Sometimes, what are things that you think would be helpful for us to look at?
There is a parent question about discipline in feedback February that our looked at, but this would be more looking at the data possibly. So
Yeah, so I'll
looking at
tell
how
you.
the data on who is being disciplined, how are they being disciplined, is that effective, is it changing behavior, that kind of thing, right?
It's like that's what we have. So the discipline that we have at our disposal are, we've got referrals, stuff we track. Students that are placed in this disciplinary setting, that disciplinary setting, that kind of stuff. And so that's what we have. And so we're not sure that gets to what we need. It might be. That's all we have.
It's just, there isn't with some of these, there can be a frame around it, here's what we did before, but, so if we find out Cambridge had 7 office referrals in the month of February, what do you do with that?
Yeah.
Like, we can track it, but how do you know, is that good, is it not good, what is it? So that's where we're getting at. We quantify it, but we don't have a way to say, are we on track with it? But we're working through it.
Or, are you also looking at how
Well, insofar as you can measure that. So, for example, in our system, we log what the kids get in terms of a concrete consequence. So I can do a report on detentions, in-school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions, discipline school placements, expulsions, all that is there. But I can't say how well the AP explained it to the parent. Okay, and then, I'll be honest with you, a lot of feedback I get is like that. It's like, well, I don't feel like they explained to you what happened. Or I don't feel like, because here's the classic thing, right? What happened to the other kid?
Yeah.
And so we all know, we've heard the song and dance, that there's a federal privacy protection that says we're not supposed to show educational information about a kid to anybody else but that kid's parents. And that's an educational record. Like, that's one of those things. So it's weird. So that's one of those things I don't know because I don't know what you did to the other kid. Now, I know as a disaggregated data point saying, I don't know, but somebody got in-school suspension that day. I'm not sure who that was, but it's in the system, right?
Well, I would say that's and it's my microcosm. So both of my boys played sports, and so I felt like they were somewhat balanced. So again, it's my microcosm. So typically the parents, it was my kid got attacked or what, was never, I can't remember the call. And we got a good kid in the school, not literally, but it's like, and it's, just this, again, bullying, it just starts, and it just goes, and it gets so distorted to what really probably actually happened. And so sometimes I wonder if it's the communication in school.
So the question would be, how
Maybe the expectations.
Yeah, so how do, like if we want to get better at that, we can certainly create a plan to get better at that. So the next question is, so let's think through ways to measure whether we're getting better at it or not. That's great. Like that could be a survey question, that could be focus groups. That would be a word to go. Yeah, that's good feedback. Yeah.
Well, thank you all for all of your service, all of your, and for the genuine feedback, the thoughtful conversation, like it really is, it means a lot, and it is exceedingly helpful.
So speaking of that, let's give her a round of applause. Do we have one more question for Jim?
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
was
yeah.
just wondering if this information was online somewhere.
So, thank you for that. What we usually do is, we have a big summer school views.
Yeah.
And we always put the results and the action, because right now it's going to campuses, and campuses are coming up with actions for next year's plan. So we put here's what we found, here's what we're doing, and it's in school views that comes out in the summer.
Is it emailed out to parents?
It's mailed.
Yeah, so there's two things I'd say. So that's, yeah, there's a thing in the mail, but we do, correct me if I'm wrong, but the aggregate of all that will be posted online, right? We have a page for CVAS.
Correct.
And so in the story,
Correct.
we'll say, for more information, look at that.
Thank you.
But there's always on our webpage, there's a page called, there's a big page called accountability, and community-based accountability is always a page, and that's where we update stuff.
Right now, you could go on right now and get the
Go.
previous year's happening,
Yes.
right?
And
It's
then
just
now
not
that-
this, because this hasn't been
Correct.
compiled. It had to go through this council first for review and then continue to create action.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly right.
Jimmy does a great job explaining it, but also staying up with it. So speaking of on that segue on thanks, there's a couple of things. I'll remind you that we did human sexuality. I just need to say it again because I'm finally taking it to the board at some point, probably June, as is my guess, but we just got so far ahead that I needed to catch up with the board. But I wanted to thank everyone. We have rotations, and so if you're a parent, you serve a 2-year term. If you're an employee, 3 or vice versa.
3-year parent, 2-year teacher, 1-year student.
There you go. So parents are on a 3-year term, and we kind of keep track of that. Employees are on 2-year terms, and students are on a 1-year term. You can always get reappointed, though, if you're not a senior. But so I want to thank, these are the folks that we have. Our records show that you'll be rotating off. I will ask you all for recommendations for other people to reach out to. Just so you know, that's how I get the names from previous members, but I also ask trustees. So trustees will give me names as well. And so whatever open slots I have for parents, I'll reach out to those folks, and we'll start doing that probably in May. And then for employees, I work with the principals. So principals are the ones that tell me employees. And then finally, for students, that's the high school principal tells me as well. So thank you all if you're on this list. Thank you very much for being part of this. Of course, board is the president appoints the board members. So can we give everyone a round of applause for your service? And that's it. Thank you so much. This is our next year. So if you're re-upping, we'll send you an email. But those are our next year meetings going forward. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Have a great week.